we are back now live with Caleb Maupin, who is a investigative reporter and also a journalist, author. He's also the founder of CPI, the Center for Political Innovation, and he had a recent interactions with one of my favorite diplomats in the world, who's just amazing, the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov from Russia. So, Caleb, welcome to the show.
Sure. Glad to be here.
It's good to talk to you again. It's been a minute. A New York minute, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to start off with, Reef, can you pull up the SOT with the video of Caleb and Sergei Lavrov? Okay, great. I'll give you a second to do that. Caleb, how many interactions did you get to have with Mr. Lavrov?
Well, I asked him one question. I did a follow-up question, but he didn't really want to answer the follow-up question that I did. That was about China and its role in Ukraine. But he did answer my first question. So, yeah, I guess you have the clip. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. So you got that up, Reef? All right, let's go ahead and play that for the audience so they can see what we're talking about.
Которые касаются российских удобрений, российского зерна. Эти части сделки блокируются западными санкциями. И именно для того, чтобы преодолеть эти санкции и снять препятствия на пути экспорта удобрений и зерна на мировые рынки, работает генеральный секретарь. Он подписался меморандуме делать все возможное для того, чтобы этих целей достичь. Видимо, потребуется невозможное. Пока такого мы не наблюдаем. Ну а что касается перспектив сделки, я только что отвечал вашей коллеге. Действительно, Антонио Гутерреш вчера передал послание президенту Путину. Оно будет доложено, и о реакции будет сообщено.
All right, so there you have it. I'm hoping my mic's back on, Reef, right? We love hot mics. I remember when that happened a few months ago, Reef. Remember that when I was on a hot mic during the intro? That was hilarious.
I don't even want to talk about it.
You never live it down,
Reef. I'm the worst.
You never see dangling with a hot mic because God knows what I'll. Well, everybody knows what I'll be saying because I always say it out loud anyway. So, Caleb, tell me. Speaking of saying it out loud, you really came out there with a good question for Sergei Lavrov. So what prompted you to ask that particular question?
Well, I was asking about the fact that, this Black Sea grain deal is something that Russia has been working on for quite some time, because there's a number of countries around the world that depend on Russia for grain, for fertilizer, etc. And that because of the sanctions the United States has put on Russia, it's quite hard for Russia to export them. And the United States is trying to blame Russia for that. And Russia's saying, look, we want to export this grain. And so they've been having these negotiations. And every time it seems like they've reached some mechanism for Russia to go ahead and do it. Another port is blocked. Another bank is blocked. Another corporation gets cold feet and is afraid of doing the transaction. And I basically asked, how much longer is this going to go on? Because we know they're just going to blame Russia for these countries not getting it in American media. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to be honest and say, no, we with our sanctions prevented this from happening. And it appears that time after time, Russia has come back to the table and said, look, we need this ship to go to this port. We need this bank to be able to transfer the money here. And the United States says, oh, yeah, sure, we'll let that happen. And then it doesn't happen. Or it does happen, but then there's another mechanism through which these things are blocked. And it kind of fit in with the overall speech that Lavrov gave at the UN Security Council, or what he basically was saying was that the benefits of a global economy are being eroded and prevented by U.S. efforts to maintain dominance, that we could really see prosperity as a result of the fact that Russia and China and so many countries are trading with each other, building infrastructure, et cetera. But the United States is so determined to remain dominant in the global economy. The United States is so determined not to allow other countries to rise that they are creating an economic crisis that's really hurting many countries in the world, not just Russia. It's hurting Europe primarily. They're the primary victims of this, but many countries around the world are suffering as a result of it. no one's really benefiting, but the United States is just determined to not let other countries step up to the plate, to not see multipolarity. And that was kind of what he was saying, that the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, a lot of these organizations that are supposed to be, for example, well, I get to an example in a second, but a lot of these international organizations that are supposed to be neutral are being used for geopolitical ends by the United States, and everyone is losing here. A great example of that was the fact that the UN is supposed to be completely neutral, and the United States is obligated to let the UN be the UN. But yet they blocked the visas, of all of the reporters who wanted to accompany Sergei Lavrov. He has a usual press pool.
Wait. Let's dig in there for a second. You're saying that the journalists that were coming from Russia to the United States were blocked. The United States would not allow them to have visas so they could do their jobs.
Yeah, they didn't technically deny the visas, but they just made some, they didn't get completed in time, whatever. And so the press pool that travels around with Lavrov, travels with him around the world to every country he goes. There's certain reporters and journalists from Russian media. They were not able to enter the United States and accompany him. And that's just blatant behavior on the part of the United States. We don't like Russia. And so I guess we have to let the foreign minister come to speak at the UN, but we're going to not let his press pool accompany him. That's absolutely ridiculous. And it's an abuse.
Garbage. That's absolute garbage. That shouldn't have happened. What was his response to that?
He pointed out that this shows an example of the United States abusing the fact that the UN is there. Now, I asked earlier in the day, the UN spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, I asked him about this. And I said, doesn't this show that the UN probably shouldn't be in the United States? Because this isn't the first time they've done this. I was covering the Iran nuclear deal. And right after the Iran nuclear deal was signed, Iran picked a new ambassador to the United Nations, a guy named Hamid Abu-Talebi. And the United States said, well, we don't like him. We think he's a terrorist. And they blocked his visa. And Iran had to actually pick a new UN representative. Iran was basically denied the right to pick their own UN representative because the United States didn't approve of who they picked. There are many, many examples of this, of the USA basically abusing its privilege of having the UN in the United States.
You make a good point, because I heard from one of the diplomats that they are not allowed, Russian diplomats are not allowed, and I don't know what other countries are included in this, are not allowed to go 24 miles radius outside of the UN in New York City. Did you know that?
Oh, I know this.
They're not allowed to go on vacation. They're not allowed to travel. They're not allowed to see America. Like, they're here and they're not allowed to go anywhere. I mean, imagine, I think New Jersey is the farthest they could probably go, if that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's particularly crazy. And not only do they not get to travel, but if they get close, the FBI will send them a notification, just so you know, we noticed that you were almost 25 miles away as of this date. I mean, it's particularly ridiculous. Whoa. I mean, there was one example of this.
Now, does that happen to Americans over in Russia? No, they're allowed to travel all over.
Yeah. And I mean, the most blatant, abuse of that we saw was, when Gaddafi was still running Libya. He was the president of the African Union in his final years. And so he was to speak at the UN General Assembly. And he actually owned property in a town in upstate New York that was within the 25-mile radius. And so that town passed a city ordinance, preventing him from sleeping in his own house. I mean, this gets to be ridiculous, the way that they pressure foreign leaders. North Korea has no diplomatic relations with the United States, but they do have a UN mission. And right now, New York City is threatening to change the name of the street that their UN mission is, to name it after Otto Warmbier, just as a dig at North Korea for their UN mission. It's crazy how much abuse of the fact that the UN is in the United States goes on. And
maybe
the world
it needs
just has
to be moved. Has anyone posed this?
Well, actually, yes. There's been a long time call for the UN to be in India, because they feel like that makes sense, because India is somewhat neutral. It's friendly to both Russia and China, as well as the United States. And it's on, the Eurasian, hemisphere, which is important, which is where most of humanity is at this point. Some people have actually, and this is a very interesting proposal, there's been a proposal to put the UN in the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. That has been proposed as well, because that would be the UN making a statement about world peace, right? You know, to have it right between North and South Korea, that would be basically saying if war were to break out, you'd have to destroy the whole UN at the same time, and it would be the UN making clear that they want to see peace between North and South Korea. So there have been different proposals that have been raised over the years, but at the moment it seems like the UN is in Manhattan. That land was donated by the Rockefeller family, mind you.
There you have it.
Yeah, the founding meetings of the UN were in San Francisco, and then the Rockefellers donated that big chunk of land in Manhattan. It's been there ever since, but there are different proposals for moving it. So I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I'm muting because my neighbors have dogs, so I didn't want the audience to have to listen to a bunch of barking dogs in the background. I wanted to go back to the Lavrov when you were there in the press room. Did you observe major Western media there? Were they mostly independent media? And if so, what was their attitude towards him, and what kind of questions did they ask him?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I have some stories about what went on in the press room. Usually it's just standard. You know, people just come in, you sit in your chair, you have your press meeting, whatever, right? So I went in and I was there for the press briefing beforehand with the UN foreign minister, or the UN spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric. And then after that was Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. So I saved a seat next to me for my producer. My producer wanted to be there for when Lavrov was there. And so I saved a seat for my producer, and I had this seat next to me. So after the first press briefing from the UN spokesperson was over, then a whole lot of mainstream media reporters started coming in because they wanted to be there for Lavrov. And this one reporter came in, I believe he was with the Wall Street Journal, and he was wearing a button that had the name of this Wall Street Journal reporter who's been arrested or something, or in Russia. And he wanted to sit next to me. And I said, no, you are not going to sit next to me with that. I said, no, this is for my producer. I'm saving my seat. And then 2 or 3 other reporters turned around and were like insisting that he sit next to me. And I said, no, I'm saving this seat for my producer. You can't sit next to me. And I'm seeing that button, which is a dig at Russia. And I said, no, I'm not going to let you be up at the front and sit next to me in the spot I'm saving for my producer with your anti-Russian button on. And what's particularly interesting is the UN forbids all political statements in the UN. You can't come into the UN with a political T-shirt on. You cannot be wearing political buttons. And earlier, the security at the UN had told the Wall Street Journal guy to take that button off because you can't be demonstrating. You know, I mean, you know, what if the Israeli speaker was speaking and someone was wearing a Palestine button? They wouldn't allow that. You know, they don't allow political statements. But so this guy was originally told by the security to take it off. He made a big stink about it, made a big fuss. Oh my God, my freedom of speech is being suppressed. And then he had it on the entire press conference. He had it on, this thing about the Wall Street Journal reporter. You know, unbelievable, unbelievable. Imagine if I showed up with a button about the Uhuru movement. You know, you think they would have allowed me to have that at the press conference? And the way that they tried to like bully me out of my seat, basically, so they could try to get close to Lavrov with a political statement. That was pretty awful. The mainstream press, they're pretty unbelievable. You know, they don't. They all kind of look. I tell people this. You know, I used to be. I'm in New York City. I'm the New York City reporter for RT. And, you know, I have worked, and at one point I was like working the UN desk for Press TV, the TV network from Iran. Right. And I was at the UN every day. So I would go to all the like little socials and receptions that the UN press corps has. And I would talk to these people, and it shocked me because, you know, I went to a small like business school in Ohio. You know, I mean, whatever. I'm from a small town. I went to a small business school, but these would be people sitting next to me who went to Harvard. They went to Yale. You know, they went to like Ivy League schools. These are supposed to be like the smartest people in the country. And I would talk to them about Syria, and they would have no idea that there was another side of the story in Syria. I would talk to them about like Russiagate and all this, and it was like they could not understand that there was more than another side to the story. And I'm like, you're supposed to be the smartest and brightest people. And you meet these people, their understanding is really, really shallow. They know who the good guys are supposed to be. They know who the bad guys are supposed to be. That's all they know about politics. And it was shocking to me. These are supposed to be the smartest people in the country. And they're like, wow, you know, I know a lot of people.
But they're getting big paychecks to basically just toe the State Department line. So what kind of questions did they ask Lavrov?
Oh, they asked him all kinds of questions about nuclear war, and and I mean they were asking him questions that were trying to make him look bad, but he handled it quite well. You can watch the whole press conference, and it went on for quite some time. He did a great job. He knows how to handle them very, very well. And Maria Zakharova, who is his press person, she calls on people, she knows people, and they've got a great team there. They know what they're doing. I mean, Russia's been dealing with a hostile Western press for a really long time.
Right. Right.
And they know what they're doing.
Was he able to talk a little bit about, like, for instance, in regards to visas being denied, right, of the journalists that were supposed to be accompanying him? Did he get to talk to the press a little bit about that, or make any kind of press statements? I saw a couple of articles about it, but really not too much in the mainstream. And I think it's really remarkable that they actually kept, I just can't believe they kept journalists out. Like, where's our freedom of press? I don't understand.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what he said essentially. And he said that by blocking him, they were trying to prevent the world from hearing what he had to say, right? They were trying to silence his message, because that's what the reporters who would accompany him would do. They would then amplify what he had to say at the UN and let the world hear it. And by blocking them, they were essentially blocking and silencing him, just like they just recently silenced Tucker Carlson. Right. I mean, they and he commented on Tucker Carlson, which I thought was pretty neat. He actually, from the podium, he talked about Tucker Carlson, which I thought was pretty great as well.
There's one other question that you asked, not of Lavrov, but I think you asked the head of the UN, or one of the heads of one of the delegations, and I can't remember. I'm trying to remember. I apologize. You can tell me who it was. But you asked them about the Uhuru movement group, about being arrested, the 4 Black socialists that have recently been indicted and are facing maybe up to 10 years in prison because they were sowing discord, according to the DOJ. So tell me a little bit about that, and tell our audience a little bit about that.
Well, so I asked Stefan Dujarric, who is the UN spokesperson. He's the spokesperson for the Secretary General. And he had a press briefing right before Lavrov's press briefing. And I asked him that question. And it was about the fact that the Uhuru movement, this group of Black socialists, 3 of their people and 1 guy from another political group called Black Hammer, have been indicted. And the crime is, conspiracy to act as Russian agents or whatever. And if you read it, all they did was have some Zoom calls, write some emails. Like, they're citing routine activity, that I mean is protected constitutional speech. They're citing that as an example of some kind of acting as a Russian foreign agent. And in the indictment, they keep accusing them of sowing discord. You gave really eloquent remarks about it when you spoke. I know you were at the event with Diane Sayre, and I posted that clip because it was a really powerful comment that you made. I mean, if they can come for them, they can come for anybody at this point.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's so obviously abuse of the Department of Justice, and it fits in with what the Biden administration is doing all around. They're targeting their political opponents with criminal charges, and they're doing it left and right to all kinds of different people. I believe there's a rap artist who they just convicted on similar charges, claiming he was acting as an agent of China because he paid for a photo with Obama or something.
Oh, that's right. I saw that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's craziness. I've never seen it like this in my lifetime, and I know you have it in your lifetime. It's really gotten hysterical is how I would describe it. But more than hysterical, what are they hiding? They're so desperate. It just shows how desperate they are to silence those of us that want peace. And isn't it amazing that we live in a time, well, and this has happened to other generations too, but we live in a time where you're targeted as a dissident if you believe in peace and you don't believe in war. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Democrats aren't even going to have a debate with RFK. Biden won't even have to face off with Marianne Williamson or RFK or any of his critics. Biden is he's the candidate. Kamala Harris, who's even less popular than he is, she's the candidate for vice president. And you have a problem with that? Well, take it up with the Republicans, I guess. I mean, if you're a Democrat, I mean, it's ridiculous. And then it looks like Trump, they've got the criminal proceedings against him. I mean, it looks like we're not even going to have a real election. I mean, it looks like, we're going to get a choice of voting for or against Biden. And it looks like Biden will win, and that'll be that. This sounds like some kind of authoritarian dictatorship, some kind of caricature of what a dictatorship would be like.
Exactly. And of course, they've just allocated last week 1.9 million to re-education and to work with universities and media to stop disinformation, what they consider disinformation. I think we're heading towards what you just said. It's a fascist state, a totalitarian. It's really very frightening, and we're losing our space now because we're facing nuclear war. And like Scott Ritter has made a very good point that we are on the verge of nuclear war right now. And if we lose our freedom of speech, we're not going to even be able to protest it, the road that they're taking to get us there. So it's a very frightening time. But thank you for what you're doing, Caleb.
Thank you.
Where can people find, tell a little bit about Center for Political Innovation. Where can they find information about that and your book?
Oh, sure. Well, the Center for Political Innovation is an educational think tank. We put on conferences, we publish books, we do events. The website is cpiusa.org. That's cpiusa.org, the Center for Political Innovation. We just had a great conference in Washington, D.C. to counter Biden's Summit for Democracy. It's called the Summit Against Hypocrisy. And a documentary about that is coming out in the next week or so. Peter Coffin, the comedian, made a great documentary about our conference. So that'll be up on the web pretty soon. I'm pretty excited about that. That's going to be awesome. Scott Ritter was there, Garland Nixon, some others, and the documentary will be out soon. And my new book is called Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. And I did a great segment about it with Kim Iverson. It went really well. It's getting a lot of good reviews. People are reading it both internationally and domestically. It was highlighted in the Global Times of China, that's like one of the main newspapers in China. They interviewed me about it. So that was pretty cool.
Good.
Yeah. So we're getting
Excellent.
the message out there. I will say, I do want to end with this, which is that it looks pretty bleak right now, but you have to remind yourself, how many dissidents are there? There are so many people that can see through this. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's why they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes so badly, is they know that there are just so many people that aren't going along with what they want. And like the Twitter files and everything that's happened, they're scrambling to try and like keep control of this because they've lost control already, I think.
Very good point. Go forth and sow discord, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It was great to have you, Caleb. And
Sure.
we have someone who does that quite well coming up next. Jose.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, from the Diane Stair campaign. So we're going to talk about his latest intervention.
Great. Awesome.
So thanks so much, Caleb, and come back soon. Take care.
Anytime. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.